A dying Dr. Octopus used nanotechnology to take over Peter Parker's body and become a superior Spider-Man, but is the Marvel Legends 85 years version a superior Spider-Man action figure? Make like a wall crawler and stick around. Welcome to 5 Points of Articulation. Starting with the packaging, we've got our Marvel Legends 85 years Windabucks. You can tell because it has that 85 year seal of approval, name on the side, picture on the spine, and full shot of Otto Parker on the back. I gotta admit, this new box style has grown on me, though I do miss the inclusion of a bio. For those looking for Otto in store, and here's the UPC, and for packaging, Superior Spider-Man gets 5 points. Moving on to presentation, and Superior Spider-Man stands at 6 3/8 inches, or about 16 centimeters. The idea of replacing Peter Parker with Dr. Octopus was pretty polarizing at the time, but especially with the benefit of hindsight, it's a story that I personally really like. Where do you land on Superior Spider-Man? Sound off in the comments. The figure's a fascinating combination of parts, both old and new, and some of those new parts have very interesting implications for future figures. First things first, and just getting this out of the way, the legs and feet are complete reuse from Spider-Man Renew Your Vows. I actually thought that the arms were also complete reuse, but that is actually not the case. Side by side, and thanks to that painted webbing, it's hard to tell. Swapping out with Daredevil though, which was built on the Renew Your Vows body, and it becomes instantly clearer. Renew Your Vows was definitely the base, but looking closely you'll notice that there's actually some musculature here that the other figure doesn't have. Otherwise, the forearms appear the same, except of course for these added gauntlets. The most significant and also the most controversial choices, however, were made with the all-new torso. When I first saw this figure solicited, I assumed that the torso was reuse. Using Chasm as an example, I originally thought it was going to be the Sunfire body mold, but Otto here is a bit slimmer, the muscles are more well-defined, and the line work extending below the waist simply does not match. I even wondered for a second about Bucky Cap, but that's also clearly not the case. This torso is completely new and has some interesting features. For one thing, we've got these peg holes to accommodate his multi-legged backpack. Most importantly, however, is this new torso has drop-down hip hinges. So far, we've only seen that in figures using the reverse ab crunch of Renew Your Vows, but this tells me that moving forward, more figures are going to have access to this articulation. I have seen a lot of curious collectors contemplate why Superior Spider-Man couldn't have just included a diaphragm joint, the reigning theory, of course, being having to accommodate the backpack. That being the case, though, and I would point out that Superior Octopus had a backpack, and no trouble whatsoever including both the diaphragm and also butterfly joints. Obviously, that's more of a conversation for posability. In the meantime, I am very excited about the potential here, and for a design like this, I do prefer the simple up and down of an ab crunch rather than breaking up the lines with a diaphragm. To Hasbro's credit, they did continue the paint underneath, though it does admittedly look a bit weird. And that brings us to the really stellar paint job. Otto went for a messier design in his Spider-Man costume, and one ambitious choice by the Hasbro team was to paint the reflection of the city in his lenses. I'm wondering if they weren't maybe inspired by this panel. This was a bold choice, and I applaud Hasbro for any time they want to give us more paint. Fortunately, if you don't like this look, they did include an additional head that we'll talk about in Playability. For presentation, I'm giving Superior Spider-Man 5 points. If you're enjoying this video so far, do me a favor and give it a like. Moving on to posability, and this is possibly the most important part of any Spider-Man figure. Unlike the Renew Your Vows body, whose head is on a dumbbell joint, Superior Spidey's head is on a ball joint and a disc swivel. The downside of that is you do have that visible joint. The upside, however, is not only do you get great range up or down, but unlike Renew Your Vows Spidey, it doesn't look like his head's about to fall off. The lack of dumbbell does mean you don't really get any tilt, but of course you do get all the way around. Moving on down, and Spidey's swivel hinge shoulder can raise this high, which is great. It also gets forward and back thanks to that butterfly joint, and also complete rotation. Moving down the muscly arm, and we've got bicep swivel, hingeless double jointed elbow with a great bend, and then at the ends of the arms are wrists that can swivel and hinge either up or down. Moving to the middle, and I've already talked at great length about the ab crunch and waist swivel, but now it's time to see what it can do. Well, for one thing, it can arch back this far, which is just plain inhuman, and hunch forward this far, which is exactly what I want to see in an ab crunch. That lack of diaphragm does of course mean it doesn't get any kind of kinda tilt, but thanks to that waist he does get twist. Below the waist, we've already talked about the drop-down hips. Those, of course, are on ball joints. He can actually kick this high, which is really impressive, and gets a near-perfect split. Here's Chasm for comparison, who does not have drop-down hips. Naturally, Superior Spider-Man gets thigh cut. He's also got pinless, double-jointed knees, boot cut rotation, toe articulation, and Marvel Legends ankles that can hinge, and like Dr. Otto Octavius from his own body to Peter Parker's pivot. If this was anyone but Spider-Man, there would be no question as to how many points this deserved. I get that we lose something with the lack of diaphragm, but the drop-down hip and toe articulation do count for something. With that being the case, for posability, I'm still giving Superior Spider-Man 5 points. Moving on to playability, and this is the best part. First things first, we've been looking at this head throughout the video. He does, however, also come with this one. Although they're similar, if you look closely, there are actually sculpted differences between the two. Strictly speaking, I do like this one better, though I appreciate what they were trying to accomplish here. I just prefer that nice, simple, white, bug-eyed look, even if the lenses should technically be black. Also, for those wondering, there's no problem fitting a regular Peter Parker head, and that mischievous smirk takes on a whole new dimension in this context. As for hands, Otto comes preloaded with a pair of fists, but he also has a pair of thwippies. This gives us a much better appreciation for that two-tone paint job, and instead of traditional wall crawlers, he comes with these more sinister clawed grippies. Zooming on in, and you can really appreciate those pointed fingertips. Referring back to the comic though, and there should technically be web lines in there. Of course, I'm sure what everyone's wondering about are the Waldos. I found them! First up, and here's a backpack for when the Waldos are not in use. Recall the 3 peg holes in Spidey's back. The backpack plugs in like so. I gotta say, I'm pretty impressed with how little it interferes with articulation, but then we have a separate backpack to accommodate the Waldos. Taking into consideration that there is a curve, each one is about 8 inches long. Each knuckle has a swivel hinge, except of course for the end. Those just have hinges, with the peg hole itself providing rotation. All 4 are identical, so it doesn't really matter which one you put where, and as you no doubt have already heard, can support its own weight to give us really cool poses like this. Having been let down a little bit by the Waldos on the Iron Spider, and this is everything I had hoped for. For the only other Superior Spider-Man in my collection, and here's this one by Marvel Select. Hasbro did make one previously, but I sold mine off years ago. That said, for one comparison that seems appropriate, here we have the Superior Octopus, and also the Iron Spider. For just a few other villains who appeared in the Superior Spider-Man run, who I have in action figure form, and here we have Shocker! The Vulture, and the Green Goblin. For some of the Avengers who appeared in Superior Iron Man, and here's the Marvel Now Captain America, who I think is due for an update. The superposable Beyond Earth's Mightiest Black Widow, the Avengers Beyond Earth's Mightiest Spider-Woman, and the only other 85 years figure I've looked at so far, Wolverine. For an important supporting character to the Superior Iron Man run, and here we have Mary Jane Watson, but for the OG Spider-Man, and here we have Renew Your Vows. Despite the differences in the torso, these two look fine side by side. Speaking of side by sides, and for a relative scale comparison, here we have Pizza Spidey and the Spectacular Spider-Man, and as always, here's Superior Spider-Man with Stealth Iron Man. I was superior before it was cool. With 4 extra hands, an extra head, 2 backpacks, and 4 fully articulated Waldos, I am more than happy with everything that comes in this box. For playability, I'm giving Superior Spider-Man 5 points. This leaves us with nothing left to discuss but the price. I can't speak for every retailer, but I got mine at Target for only $24.99. $25 for all this isn't just a good value, it's a superior one. For price, I'm giving Superior Spider-Man 5 points, averaging out to a perfect total of 5 out of 5. For more Spider-Man videos, check out one of these. Until next time, play nice and have fun.